Welcome back to the Washcast. This week, I have with me a multifaceted individual, reality TV star, contestant, let's see, stripper, trans woman, and now right wing icon, Mr. Josh Seiter.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you? How was that for an intro? Is that sufficient?
That was amazing. Thank you, man. I'm humbled.
Oh, absolutely. So man, it's been an interesting year for you, hasn't it?
It has, man. Yeah, it's been kind of a roller coaster for sure. I mean, I changed genders, so that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, come on. It's commonplace now. Everybody does it. Didn't you know
Yeah,
that?
right?
Everyone sterilizes and mutilates themselves. Thank God, didn't go that far, but
Well, thankfully, I'm so grateful for the science that I was able just to revert back to being a man. So no harm, no foul. That. Just trust the science. That's how it works.
isn't it funny how the people that told us all through COVID to trust the science are like, yeah, men can get pregnant. Got it.
Well,
Good to
what I
know.
always say to that, what they're referring to is, trans men or trans identified women. And what I always say is trans men can get pregnant because they're women. You're just calling them men and making it sound like they're just women. It's just proof that they're women. So you're not really saying much.
Well, and it's kind of weird how that Overton window shifted over the years because it was, I'm a transsexual man. And then now it's just like, yeah, no, I'm a man. We're good.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, on the upside, though, it's the old expression: if you can throw a punch like a man, you can get hit like a man. Well, if you identify as a man, you can get hit like one too.
I would prefer that they would just stop with the identifying nonsense and just speak the truth. They're really good, right, at these semantical games and using this verbal legerdemain to kind of try to confuse people, and then they're always changing definitions of words, meanings of words. Oh, racism. Actually, you need to have power to be racist. So actually, black people can't be racist because they don't have institutions of power. Oh, well, that's rather convenient that you just came up with that definition on the spot to excuse you from any wrongdoing. So they've been doing this for decades. They're just getting better and better at it. So.
Well, and it all has Marxist roots too, of creating an oppressed class. When it wasn't black people anymore, then they started going, oh, well, it's Hispanics. They're, the border thing's racist. Now it's gays, trans. It's like, guys, just chill. I'm fine. I've been gay my entire life, and I have the same exact rights as everybody else. Go fuck yourself. There's no marginalized class here.
Well, I just saw one of my good friends, you might know him, Conservative Ant, was going off today on social media. He said, listen, white women that are liberals, stop speaking for us gay people. We don't need you to speak for us. You don't speak for us. It's always the oppression Olympics for the left, and they're always trying to speak up for other groups that they think are marginalized. And what's so funny is often those groups speak up for themselves and say, go fuck yourself, we're not marginalized. And so it's just kind of funny to watch. But yeah, it's always the oppression Olympics with these people. It's nauseating.
Yeah, and I think there was a little bit of a wake-up call within this election itself because, I mean, you look, it was always, oh, the Republicans are the racist ones. Well, then why did black men turn out in numbers to vote for it? Like, it's that kind of the pendulum swinging back a little bit. And I think we're starting to see that a little bit with this whole trans craziness that we've been seeing. You have the Parliament over in the UK that banned puberty blockers for minors, things like that. I mean, I guess a Muslim government's good for some things. We'll just lay that one out there. But before we really jump into that, was there like a specific moment for you that you were like, okay, I've got to do something to expose this? Was there like a moment where you stepped forward into that?
Yeah, there was a couple. I saw that refrain that most of us saw where it was trans women are women, and they repeated it about 10 times and they're posting it everywhere. Well, we all know that's just patently false. Trans women are trans identified men, they're men, and nothing changes because you uttered a phrase, I identify as a woman. It's not magical. It doesn't imbue you with a superpower to change your gender, much less your sex. And so I kept seeing that refrain, and I was like, trans women are not women, they're dudes. And then another thing was I kept seeing it being peddled towards little kids because they knew most of the public that was adult and sentient and thinking was going to reject this nonsense. So they started going after our kids. And I saw my nephew was watching YouTube Kids, and I saw a commercial for a show, and it was a fish telling the other fish, I'm not male or female. I'm non-binary because I don't feel like a boy or a girl. Well, my nephew's 4.5, and it said this was for ages 4 to 8. That infuriated me. So it was just, it was those things, and then just them constantly trying to shove it down our throats. So I said, you know what? I'm going to expose this. And my friend said, well, if you do, they're just going to label you a transphobic bigot, and it's going to be hard to get around that, to maneuver around that. And I said, well, what if I infiltrate them? And make an absolute mockery of it, because that's what it is. It's a joke. And then I destroy it from the inside like a mole. And if anybody criticizes me, I'll just say they're a transphobic bigot. And my friend goes, actually, that's genius. And so
that's in this day and age. Imagine if this was, 20, 30 years ago, where you would have had to try, right? You'd had to shave the chest and have all the surgeries and everything done. Now you can just slap a wig on, roll out in public in a mini skirt and chest hair. Everybody's fine with it. It makes no sense.
Yeah, I always say, and the fact that we can't tell the difference between slapstick comedy and the trans movement is an indictment on how stupid the trans movement is. It looks like an SNL skit, and so it made it very easy for me, and the bar was set very low for me to do this, because like you said, all I had to do was throw on a dress. I didn't even have to shave my face, because now there's people saying, oh, my facial hair doesn't dictate my gender. Oh, my body parts don't dictate my gender. Oh, my genitals don't dictate my gender. So I said, you know what? I am going to use all of those phrases anytime anyone criticizes me about my attire, my facial hair, my voice. I'll say my body, my voice. My facial hair doesn't dictate my gender. The fact that I haven't gotten bottom surgery, my body parts don't dictate my gender. So I had all these canned responses that they use at the ready if they were going to hurl any insults or criticism at me. And so if you actually go and look at my comments, there's there's tens of thousands, of hundreds of thousands of comments under my posts, but I replied to a handful of them. And every time it was just giving these canned responses of, my body, my choice. It doesn't dictate my gender. And so, it's very easy to use their logic against them. And I had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, it's so strange though, because it's like, oh yeah, no, my dick doesn't mean I'm a man. I can't touch it.
One of the last videos I did was touching on that, no pun intended, and I wanted to show how stupid that was. And so I ended up saying, I'm not going to get bottom surgery, but as we all know, that doesn't make me any less feminine. Our manhood doesn't negate our womanhood. And I really wanted to show how stupid and contradictory, the mental gymnastics that these people have to go through to get their fantasy world to work is absolutely mind-numbing and exhausting. But I had a fun time using those mental gymnastics against them to piss them off. So.
Well, and it's kind of easy to tell when you put it in that perspective, the constant manufacturing, the constant forcing. It's no wonder that, the 40% is a thing.
What's that?
The
oh yes, very high rate of
yeah. It's no wonder. Living under that kind of stress every day and fighting something you can't control. Like, at some point, wouldn't it just be easier to come to grips and go, you know what? Not worth it.
Well, and lots of people deal with psychiatric illnesses. Gender dysphoria is a mental illness under the DSM-5, and lots of trans people struggle with that. Now, the medical literature, which you got to be careful of it, but the medical literature says you don't have to have gender dysphoria to be trans, but we know most of them claim to have gender dysphoria. Well, like any psychiatric illness, it doesn't mean that your delusions that are symptomatic of it are reality. Most people understand that the delusions that come with schizophrenia are not based in reality, right? The CIA is not really tapping your toilet and hiding in your bushes. But we understand that with anorexic people, they're not fat at 80 pounds, right? We don't believe the delusions. We don't buy into them. But for some reason, because they've been shoving this down our throats, they want society to accept the delusion that they have, that they are actually the opposite sex. And we are forced to actively participate in this. And not only us, our children, our wives, the schools, we're told you need to affirm and actively participate in their delusions. And I always go, we don't do this with bulimic people. We don't do this with anorexic people. We don't do it with schizophrenic or bipolar people. We understand that this is a mental illness that they need to deal with in private, and we never ask society to go along with it or validate it. So why are we making an exception with trans people? And that goes back to your point that these people, they have a high rate of doing
unaliving.
Unaliving, and that is because it's a psychiatric illness. Now, if you look at the literature, a lot of the literature actually says, oh, they unalive themselves and they have high rates of drug use and high rates of sex work use because of transphobia. Now, that's not the case. Transphobia doesn't matter. If transphobia, I mean, that's a very amorphous and nebulous term, but that is not responsible for their drug use. What's causing it is they're mentally ill people. But they're never going to take responsibility for it. So it's always society's fault. It's always transphobia's fault. Reality is now transphobic, apparently. I mean, it's exhausting.
I'm still hung up on the whole they have a higher percentage of sex work because of transphobia. Like that. How the fuck does that work, dude? I mean, you were a stripper at one point, right?
Maybe that's why people believed I was trans, because I did sex work.
I mean, it could be.
They will literally say anything. They reverse engineer everything to excuse all of their behavior. There's never personal responsibility. It's always everyone else's fault. And again, at the end of the day, they're struggling from a mental illness. A man is not a woman, no matter how much he thinks he is, and he needs to get treatment for that. But sadly, we're not treating them. We're told we need to indulge their delusions. And again, I ask, if we're not told to indulge a schizophrenic and an anorexic person's delusions, why are you telling us we need to indulge theirs?
Well, I mean, it's the only other group of people that I see that we've begun to treat that way is drug addicts. Like, oh, well, it's a disease. They can't help it. Yeah, they can. They can stop putting the fucking needle in their arm and go see a doctor. Like it makes
almost
absolutely
the
no
point
sense.
of the trans, but not quite as bad and egregious. But yes, they do still make excuses for it and try to tell us that we're wrong. If we say, hey, that's not a good behavior, it's like, whoa, that's a disease. And it's like, I don't care. It's still not healthy to do heroin. So they're trying to excuse it because, again, there's never personal responsibility with the woke mob. It's always society's fault.
Yep, it's that creating an oppressed class. I can't do anything about it because I'm such and such. Well, quit crying about it. Leah in the chat said, dude looks like a runway model.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
He makes a pretty good looking woman too.
It's ma'am. It is ma'am.
My God, the video of that thing yelling at GameStop.
What's that?
Was the it's ma'am. Have you ever seen that video?
Right. I thought that was a gas station. Was that a game? That was a GameStop.
That was a GameStop.
Yeah, you're right.
That was like one of the first times I remember being like, what the fuck are we doing as a society? Like, dude, I could punch you in your Adam's apple. Like that. I can see that motherfucker. How are you going to tell me you're a woman?
Well, what's so funny now, going back to the medical literature, because during my whole troll, I loved using their rules against them. So the medical literature states in no uncertain terms, you don't have to have gender dysphoria to be a valid trans woman. You don't have to take hormones to be a valid trans woman. You don't have to even transition or get surgery to be a valid trans woman. So, people would say things like, you look like a dude that just threw on a dress. And I'd say, hey, trust the science. The science says I'm a valid trans woman, even if I take 0 steps to transition. And so that's how absurd it is that you get this guy walking into a GameStop, 6'5", with his Adam's apple bulging out in a blonde wig on. And the medical literature says he's a valid trans woman because he articulated a gender identity that differs from his biological sex. And ipso facto, that makes him a valid trans woman. And I say to that, well, that's bullshit.
It's still mind blowing to me. Like, at what point did that medical literature change from, okay, this is a mental illness, treat it with psychiatric care, to, oh, it's fine. I mean, the money. That's the only thing I can think of.
Pharmaceutical companies are incentivized, as is, hospitals and doctors are all incentivized to, provide this affirming care, because the pharmaceutical companies get clients for life from the age of 10 onward if these people are successful at grooming kids. And then hospitals are making tons of money off of it, and they're prescribing these drugs. And so, yeah, it really is this medical industrial complex, or pharmaceutical industrial complex, that's making a lot of money off the backs of these mentally ill people. And I don't know when affirming care kind of crept into the medical nomenclature, but it seems like ever since then we've moved away from kind of treating this as a psychiatric illness to, no, you need to affirm it as reality, and you can't tell them that they're wrong or that those are delusions. And all I say is, thank God we're not doing that with anorexic people. Thank God we're not doing that with schizophrenic people and affirming their delusions. Luckily, it's relegated to just these people, but it is a prescription for disaster, and we're all living in it, and we're all told we need to actively participate in their delusions, and I utterly reject that.
Yeah, no, to me it does. It feels like the same thing of, oh, you look at a schizophrenic person and go, yeah, the FBI's after you, here's a gun.
Exactly.
Like, it doesn't make any sense. But when you were, I know, I'm sure you got a lot of blowback from, people that would be the right wing, the sane ones, right? But did you get any blowback from within the trans community
during the troll?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a lot, and it almost all centered around my facial hair, which I intentionally grew out, and the dresses I would wear. Because I went to a thrift store up the street, and I would get the ugliest, most hideous dresses I could, because I really wanted to push the envelope and go, if the medical guidelines say my clothing doesn't dictate my gender and my facial hair doesn't, and I can present in whatever gender expression I want, I am going to do that to a T. And so that's what I did. So I'd grow my beard out, I'd get the worst outfits. And so a lot of the criticism was about my aesthetic. It was, Josh, if you would just shave and wear better clothes, then people would take you seriously. And it's like, oh, so I magically become a woman because I got a better fitting dress. Oh, I magically became a woman because I took a razor to my face and shaved. That's when you magically transform into a woman. So that was really what most of the criticism was focused on. But a lot of people in the trans community were supportive and were like, oh, yeah, you go, girl. Yes, I'm so glad you're a woman now, which, they'll say, Josh, you're a horrible person for mocking us for being kind and accepting to you. All Josh Seiter did was prove how kind and accepting we are. And I always say there is nothing kind and accepting about encouraging and enabling someone's mental illness and delusions. And there's nothing kind and accepting about erasing women and allowing men to invade their spaces and set the feminist movement and women's rights back 70 years. Yeah. We wouldn't say someone's kind and accepting if they give heroin to a drug addict, right? And so I really don't like that logical fallacy when they try to say, oh, we're just kind and accepting to you. That's how we've gotten into this place, into this space in the first place, is because we are kind and accepting, and look where we're at. We now have men that are being housed in female prisons, and they're violently raping and impregnating women. So how did that work out for us?
Well, and it's the same idea of like, I didn't prove anything except for the cult is nice to people to bring them in. That's it. Like, that's all they've done. The second you stepped away from it, how soon was it after you said, okay, this was all an experiment, to the first death threat?
Minutes. I mean, when I went on Alex Stein's show and said this was a social experiment, My page is already blowing up. I got over 100 million views just on my Instagram alone during my social experiment, which lasted about 5.5 months. I didn't even have a Twitter when I did the reveal. I started a Twitter that night. But right after the Alex Stein reveal, I was being flooded with messages, death threats from the trans cult and the woke mob, because like you said, it's a cult.
Yep.
And just like with Scientology or anything else, the second you step out of it and you deal in reality, they get very angry and they feel very threatened because they know their hold on people. They don't have the truth on their side. They know they have to brainwash people, and they know that it's a big risk if someone gets out of the grips of the cult. So when they realized that I was no longer a brainwashed cult member, they got very scared. And so that's why they started sending me death threats.
That's insane, man. And like the first episode of this show, I had a guy named Austin on that was detransitioner, went full bore, had bottom surgery and everything else. Traveled out of the country for it and everything, and finally realized, okay, shit, like I made a mistake. This was wrong. Like I've got to do what I got to do. And the second he started detransitioning, it was like it was like he was expelled from an Amish community. Every last one of them was like, nope, we're done. Fuck you. I hope you die. You're a piece of shit. It's like, I thought this was the love and tolerance, right? As long as you don't defect, you're good.
Exactly. As long as you go with the official narrative and you're toting the official line, right? They're very nice to you. But the second you don't, they're not. We've seen that even with the recent election. If you're in the media and you don't tote the official narrative, they get angry very quick. And a lot of them now are quitting X because they see that on X there's actually freedom of thought and there's freedom of dialogue. And they hate that because, like with any cult, they need to have a monopoly on the narrative. And so, I broke that monopoly, so to speak, and to have a defective trans person or fake trans person speaking out against the cult infuriated them.
Yeah, that whole thing was mind blowing. I remember the first time I saw one of your videos as a trans woman. I'm like, are you fucking serious? There is no way. There is absolutely no way. And then it kept going. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this dude is really fucked up in the head. Like, and then come to find out, yeah, it was a social experiment. And then Scott Pressler.
Oh, yes.
Was that that message, dude, had me dying.
Yep, Scott reached out to me. I got thousands of messages during my troll, and I was very tempted to answer some of them saying, Josh, please, I'm begging you, tell me, is this real or not? And this was maybe like 2 or 3 months in where, that's when people really started hotly debating whether it was a troll or not. And I didn't answer a single one of those messages. And Scott Pressler was one of them, who was like, please tell me if this is real or not. Hit me up when you go back to being a hot straight guy or whatever. The only message I ever answered during those 6 months, though, was Amber Rose. Amber Rose hit me up, and I've had a crush on her since I was, in college, 15 years ago. And so I was like, oh my God, Amber Rose just DM'd me. And she's like, I am such a huge fan. I need to know, is this real or not? And I debated for a while, and then finally I replied back and I said, I'm nervous to tell you here because I don't want it to get out. She's like, I swear to God, I won't tell anyone. And then I saw she was a Trump supporter, and I was like, yeah, she's not going to blow my cover. So I was like, yeah, it's a social experiment. And to her credit, she never told anybody. So
yeah, dude, I love her. That's a bad bitch right there.
Oh, she's so hot, dude. And she's smart. I love how she just trolls the left every day on her social media. It's awesome.
And I was so glad to see the RNC give her a platform to be able to welcome in a whole different sect of people to the big tent party. Literally, it was great.
Well, and it's interesting when they have people from, the more urban communities represent them, the Republicans actually have them come up and speak because the Republicans see them as humans. And they understand that, there's no difference between us and anyone else. Now,
Right.
when the Democrats have people from the urban community come or minority community come, they have them dancing on stage like monkeys, like you saw with Megan Thee Stallion and Glorilla. They're never going to put a mic in front of them to give a speech. And
Yep.
so I think if you just see that juxtaposition between Amber Rose being very articulate and, talking about what she loves about the right, and then juxtapose that with how Democrats just use minorities to, be dancing monkeys in their shows. It's just so degrading. And it goes along with everything we've seen over the last 3 decades, where the Democrats see minority groups as nothing more than this incapable, infantile voting bloc that they can pimp out whenever they want. They don't see them as equal. They don't even see them as humans. And it's just so patronizing, so condescending and disgusting. And then, Trump, not only did Amber Rose speak at the RNC, but now Trump has hired a woman as his chief of staff, and he hired Tulsi Gabbard. And so it's just really interesting to see that the people that are constantly labeled racist, misogynists are actually always the first ones that include these people. They're actually much more inclusive than the left. So.
Yeah, it's been like a weird 180, because it used to be the other way around. And to your point, they give people a platform to speak on the Republican side, but the Democrats, you saw they gave Cardi B a chance to speak, which, my God, could they have made a worse choice? But the whole time, they couldn't even get her teleprompter to work. So she's sitting there reading off of her phone. Like, come on, that wasn't her speech.
She looked like a fucking idiot. And I mean, J-Lo looked stupid too. And it's just so embarrassing. And I always say, the left used to be all about freedom of speech and minority viewpoints and differing viewpoints and diversity. They've really come away from that. And it's all about being one big monolith that follows the official narrative. And now it's actually the right that is the party of freedom of speech, whether it's on X or just always advocating for freedom of speech and a dialogue. They're always for minority viewpoints and differing opinions. And it's actually the left that's very homogenous now. And so, again, going back to your point, it's very interesting how they've kind of done a 180 since the 90s. And now the right represents diversity and the left kind of represents this homogeny. And it's very interesting to see.
And it is. It's that literally that mirror image. So from the 90s through the early 2000s, you had the Republican Party was in lockstep. It was the neocons. It was the Dick Cheneys, the George Bushes. They all had one singular goal. They marched towards it. You always had debate and discourse on the Democratic side. And now it's the complete opposite. You have the left like falling in line with a Marxist ideology, censorship, you name it. And the Republican Party, sometimes to its own detriment, they're the party of the debate.
Yep.
You're allowed to have a spectrum within the Republican Party, and they just it doesn't always work for us, granted. I mean, we look at like the 2022 2018 midterms. That we had too much discourse within the party and it crushed us. So it's just wild to me to see how quickly things spun around.
Yeah, and you even have people that were formerly on the left, like Cenk from the Young Turks, and Tim Pool, who was with Vice, and Bill Maher, who, growing up, Bill Maher, there was nobody that was more liberal than Bill. And all of these people now are highly, highly critical of the left and about how they're constantly advocating for censorship, and they're not open to free speech. They're not open to any other viewpoint other than their own. And they're defecting. And guess what? Everyone's sick of it. And I think that this last election was a referendum on free speech, a referendum on what this country should stand for, and a referendum on what our values are. And people came out and spoke and almost unanimously said, what we see going on with the left does not represent this country, and that's not what this country should be about. And they rejected it. And I think that's why the left is kind of like a dog with the tail between their legs, because they know that. So.
Well, and I mean, it goes all the way back to 2018. You look at Brandon Straka with the walk away movement, where it was, the left left me.
Yep. And that's what Tim Pool just said. The left left me. So they only have themselves to blame.
Yeah. I mean, there's no sense of, for lack of a better term, liberalism within them anymore. It's all big government.
Yep, and they became so progressive that they're cannibalistic now, and so you have the more radical wing of the left is now eating its own because they're not radical enough, and so you have AOC that's always criticizing other people that she doesn't think are, or Kamala was, you know, criticizing people who weren't as radical as her, and she was voted the most radical congressperson, you know, a few years ago that was there, and that's why she lost, because no one's buying it. And so they really are cannibalistic, and it's counterproductive for them, and that's why they lost. And they really need to go back to the drawing board and figure something else out, because people are not buying it. Look, most people don't want their 5-year-old reading a book about why daddy has a baby in his belly. And the fact that they didn't understand that and weren't even talking about that until after they lost the election, I think shows how they really had blinders on. But I think they're kind of seeing the light now, and I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, look, the left is going to get their shit together. But I don't know, because they are not the party that they were in the 90s. They're actually remind me a lot of the religious right that they used to always criticize. They used to say, hey, keep your morality to yourself. Stop pushing it on everyone else. And they did not like the Christian right in the 90s. Well, they are the new Christian right, because they are constantly trying to push their morals and their moral view of things onto everyone else. And not even that, they're trying to tell us how to speak. They're trying to tell us what words we need to use. And people are sick of it. They're sick of it, just like the Democrats were sick of it when the religious right did it in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, it's at some point, you know, the pendulum swings too far, and it always swings back. So the only difference is, I've noticed with the left, to say morality, I don't even know if that's the appropriate word, because the morality is so subjective to the left. As long as it benefits them morally, they can justify anything. If it breaks that narrative that they have so brilliantly crafted in their own heads, it's the worst thing on the face of the planet. Like, perfect example for me this election season was the way the left has had this, you know, the Free Palestine movement and all that craziness going on, and everybody's, oh, there's innocent children dying, but then they turned around and celebrated an endorsement from the Cheneys. Like, those two things do not belong together. How do you justify it? And they jump through hoops.
The left will bend over backwards to the point that they will make a hoop with their own bodies, because they're constantly bending over backwards to justify things that are hyper contradictory and hypocritical. And, you know, just the trans movement is kind of a microcosm of that. If just being inside it for the last 6 months, I saw how utterly hypocritical and contradictory it was, and the things that it would say. And they will say and do anything to justify what they want to get done. I mean, they take it, the end justifies the means to a whole new level. And so a lot of the things they do, you're just like, how can you say that with a straight face? How can you say that how can you argue for the last 5 decades that gay people are born gay? It's not a choice. But then tell us that same gay man's sex is a choice. He wasn't born a man, and he can change his sex, but not his orientation. I mean, they're just incongruent with each other. And so they're just walking hypocrites all the time.
So, and what do you think the end game is? Because, you know, you mentioned, you know, what they're trying to accomplish, whatever their agenda is. What is the end game for that community? Because, like you said earlier, that progressivism, it tends to be, I call it the Ouroboros, because it's the snake eating its own tail. What's the end game? I mean, is it to create an entire eunuch culture? Like, how does that work?
I think the end game is to stay in power. I think they have sacrificed their morals for that. And I think that they will do and say anything. And we saw this, you know, in the apotheosis of this was in Kamala Harris, who really had no moral grounding. You didn't really know who she was. There was nothing foundational about her and her political viewpoints or her platform.
Well, she was born in a middle-class family.
Yeah, I was born, and I know a few small business owners. They used to babysit me. And they will do and say anything to get votes. So I don't think they really stand for anything. They're kind of unmoored politically. And I think a lot of people catch on to that. Even AOC 2 days ago was saying she thinks the reason Kamala lost is people could smell that she was fake. They could tell that she didn't really believe the things she was saying. Well, I think that can be extended out to the party as a whole and to the left as a whole. They don't stand for anything, and most people can tell they're just fake. And I think, to answer your question, the end is to just stay in power, get votes however they have to, and they will pander to whatever group they need to pander to. We've seen them do it with African Americans for the last 70 years. Well, they will blame anything except the culture and the family unit and personal and individual behavior for their problems, because they just want their vote. So they're never going to criticize anything that goes on with them. Same thing with the trans cultists. The left will never criticize anything they do, and they will always bend and genuflect to the demands of the trans cult because they want their vote. Same thing with illegal immigrants pouring over the border. They will allow millions of people to come here because they want to sign them up, get them on the registry, and get their vote. And so I think the end goal is just to stay in power.
One party state. Yeah. That doesn't, I mean, it tracks, 100% tracks. Jay in the chat said, one world government easier to control. I honestly, I used to think that was this crazy conspiracy theory, but not so much anymore when you have organizations like the WHO and you have people like Klaus Schwab that blatantly come out and they're like, yeah, we've infiltrated cabinets all over the world. Like, this is the agenda. People still don't believe it.
Yeah, you even have Biden who said New World Order. When he first took office, there's that speech of him where he said it on video. It's not, a lot of things that they say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. It's very interesting because a few months later, it always comes out that it actually wasn't and it was correct. Or what's disinformation? Oh, Hunter's laptop's Russian disinformation. Well, those people get censored, they get silenced. And then a few months later, we find out, actually, no, it was factual. And so it's always I think it's projection when they say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Whenever I hear that, I just assume that what's being said is probably fact, because anytime it's just like 1984 with doublespeak. They will label up, down, and down, up. And so anytime I hear them labeling something a conspiracy theory, I go, okay, well, I can just infer that it's the opposite. So it's probably truthful.
Yeah, it's like the saying, what's the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth? About 6 months.
Exactly.
We saw it during COVID, safe and effective.
Exactly.
Like, now you have Bill Gates going on trial in the Netherlands because of his work with Pfizer and the other manufacturers. Like, these kinds of things, they call us crazy conspiracy theorists, but it's hilarious when you turn around and, like, Trump getting shot was, oh my God, it was all staged. It was all just a publicity stunt. And then they bitched at us for 4 years about, oh, there was no election interference. Now they turn around and it's election interference. It's one-sided the way that works. Like, the whole, oh, if it's a conspiracy theory, it's probably true. It never seems to work that way the other way around, ever.
Well, and I'll tell you what a conspiracy theory is to tell people that a man can magically become a woman because he articulated a personal identity that differs from his assigned sex. That's a conspiracy theory. Yeah. So, I mean, if anyone has a stranglehold or a monopoly on falsehoods, I think it's the left. And I bet you if people did a study to fact check who is more truthful and accurate in their statements and their philosophy, I think it would be the right that's more accurate in their statements and their philosophy. The left really peddles a lot of lies. They're very disingenuous. You can't trust anything they say. And I think that's why they were rejected this election. No one is believing anything they say anymore. Look, you totally discredit yourself when you're trying to get people to buy that a man can magically become a woman and vice versa. And if you can lie to me about that, you can lie to me about anything. And again, this goes back to the playbooks that have been written by Edward Bernays on propaganda and how you can brainwash a citizenry and populace. These are just very basic elements of any kind of dictatorial or tyrannical government, where they first have to get the public to buy these falsehoods, and they test certain falsehoods with the public. And again, it's just very Orwellian. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm living in 1984, because I'm like, did they just tell me that 6'5" dude on that women's softball team is a woman? What the fuck are we talking about here?
No, that's exactly it. It's one of those things, though, where you go back to Yuri Bezmenov. I'm sure you've seen that interview, the ex-KGB propagandist.
Oh, yeah, right.
You know, the 5 steps to destabilizing a first world country. And the first one is education. It takes 12 to 15 years. We've been doing it for 40. And so in that process, we were led to believe, because all of the people on the left are quote unquote academics. They were the ones that, you know, they started taking over tech and all of this. So for the longest time, we were led to believe, okay, hey, these guys are the smart ones. People like me, the high school dropouts of the world, are like, okay, these guys are the knowledgeable ones. They're intelligent. They've got the proper training. They know what they're talking about. And up until this, for at least for me, up until the transgender thing became an actual debate, that was just the way it was. And it seems almost like this is what shattered the glass ceiling. You know, this is what made people wake up and realize and go, hold on, wait a minute. Doctors are doing what? They're chopping a piece of your leg off and making a deformed breakfast sausage and calling it a cock? Like, we can't trust these people anymore. Yeah. And it was always the left that questioned the narrative of big pharma, the doctors. It was always, oh, well, the right's evil because they invest in it. You can't trust it. Now it's the only thing they trust.
Yeah, they really have done, again, a complete 180, where they used to always tell us to be suspicious of these things, but now they're embracing these things they told us to be suspicious of, and they're telling us that we should embrace them completely. It's not a naked power grab money. It's not a naked money grab by corporations. Whoa, I thought for the last 50 years in higher education, you were telling us that corporations are inherently evil. I mean, I had to take a whole ethics class on why corporations by design and by definition are unethical, but now you're telling me that I should have unfettered trust in them? What's going on here? And so again, I think it goes back to, they will bend over backwards and contradict themselves and do cartwheels and whatever mental gymnastics they have to do to get voters and to appease certain groups. And so I think what they've done is they've kind of given up all sense of ethics in their disgusting overtures to all of these different groups to try to get them to vote for them. And now they don't stand for anything. And I think the left used to make some really good points, hey, we shouldn't let corporations be totally unfettered. Maybe a laissez-faire economy isn't the best one since we have greedy CEOs. They used to, make some good points, and now that's kind of all out the window, and they don't seem to. The only person that seems to make some fairly decent points on the left now is Bernie Sanders. I would never vote for him, but he's still one of the sensible people on the left that still seems to have some ethics and stand for something. The rest of them throw them all out the window, and they'll pander to these groups. And I mean, even with the Latinx thing, with Joe Biden telling us, oh, you need to call them Latinx, that's just another example of how they're the ones telling us that mansplaining and white people telling other groups how to live is wrong, but yet now a white man's gonna mansplain to Mexicans what they need to call themselves. The whole thing's so stupid.
It really is. I mean, I don't know. It's become, reality almost seems like a parody of itself. Like, starting to wonder if we aren't actually living in the Matrix. It seems like somebody just fucks with the code every day, because it's always something with those people. But
yeah, and I think it all goes back to, they just want votes. And if you understand it through that lens, in that paradigm, that they will do and say anything just to get votes, you understand why they're willing to bend the truth. You understand why they try to get us to bend the truth. You understand why it's always, don't believe your lying eyes. It's always, don't believe your lying eyes with the left. because they're willing to do and say anything to get votes and to stay in power. So
Martinez said, "I'm just Hispanic. Please don't make it complicated. Just Hispanic." So, I mean,
Hispanic
it's really that
X.
simple. Yeah, Hispanic X.
So embarrassing.
It really is. And, to your point, I have a lot of respect for Bernie Sanders. I'm the same way. I would never vote for the guy because his policies and the things he lays out just to me they'll never work practically here. If you're talking about small sects, like if you give it to the states and a state like Pennsylvania says, okay, we're just going to give universal health care, fine, you can manage populations like that very easily. And in fact, I would encourage states to do that within their budget, because what's it going to do? It's going to make people want to move there. So if you break it down, it works. But I think his integrity is part of the reason why they shafted him twice in the primaries, because they knew this guy is not just going to push whatever blabbering bullshit that we want to get through. He's going to question it. So they screwed him the first time with Hillary, and then they turned around and screwed him again. It's that they want a puppet. They want to serve the special interests, much like the Republicans in the 90s and the early 2000s. It's insane. But we've talked a lot of politics, a lot of, I guess, controversial stuff. What's next for you? I know you do some mental health advocacy and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. So, on my social media, on my Instagram, there's, 20 highlights there in my profile, story highlights, and they're filled with hundreds of slides that I created last year using cognitive behavioral therapy to help treat thought disorders. So anyone that has anxiety, depression, OCD, I have all three of those, but I don't make them my identity.
I have type 2 bipolar and ADHD. I don't make it my identity. I get through every day.
Exactly. We're not incapable victims that, need Kamala Harris to help us through life. It's just we all deal with things. And so this is cognitive behavioral therapy, which can treat any disorder, any thought disorder. And I think the slides are very helpful. And so that's something that I'm passionate about. A lot of people have found those helpful. I have almost a million followers on Instagram. I just got on Twitter a month ago, and I've already gotten over 100 million impressions on Twitter in the last 3.5 weeks. So I'm posting on there a lot, kind of my thoughts, just opining on politics and anything socio-political. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is just trying to speak truth to power and continue the dialogue that I opened with the troll. I started that social experiment because I was sick and tired of the chilling effect that the left has had on open debate and dialogue in this country. And, people are being jailed. They're being kicked out of college. They're losing their jobs for just asking questions and wanting to have a debate, which used to be the fabric and the fulcrum of this country, was free and open discussion, a dialectic, and people are getting in trouble and punished for it. And so after the troll, I wanted to continue that dialogue that I started with the troll. And so I've been going on podcasts like yours and on shows to talk to people and continue the conversation, because as soon as which we all know, as soon as you stop having a conversation, that's when falsehoods can take over. And the left knows this. The left peddles falsehoods. And because of that, they don't want an open conversation that can flush that out and crystallize that for the rest of the public. And so they're incentivized to quash open debate. And I think X has been instrumental in opening people's eyes this election, because it said, look, liberals, you're not going to have free reign to just peddle lies that are going to go unchecked. We're going to fact check you. You like to fact check people? We're going to fact check you. And I think that's why they lost. And so I'm a big fan of that. And I like actually talking to people that have different views than my own. It's always nice to talk to somebody that you kind of see eye to eye with, but I'd like to debate other people. And so I did just get asked by one of the largest conservative media companies to participate in a large theatrical released film that is coming soon. And so I will be filming for that in the upcoming weeks. And so
fantastic.
That makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I applaud the work with mental health, especially So many people overlook cognitive behavioral therapy, especially when you have anxiety. I had to learn the hard way how to remove myself from that spiral, because once that panic attack starts, it's either full go or you're popping a pill. And those technique it does cognitive behavioral therapy works. So
It
thank you for pushing that.
Yeah, and Albert Ellis was kind of the founder of this psychotherapy, which was called REBT, or Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy, which is what we now call cognitive behavioral therapy in today's parlance. And so what it says is, we upset ourselves. Events don't upset us. We upset ourselves. And it takes a lot from Stoicism in Marcus Aurelius in saying outside events don't upset us. We upset ourselves with our faulty thinking. And what we do is we catastrophize and we go, oh my gosh, if I embarrass myself, it's the worst thing ever. Well, no, you can embarrass yourself, but it's not the worst thing ever. It's not even objectively bad. It just is a thing that happened. And so it takes a lot of work, like you said, and you have to constantly make a concerted effort to use it. But if you can recognize your catastrophic thinking and then take the steps that it teaches you to not upset yourself, it's actually very effective. And it's what allowed me to go from being bedridden and suffering from anxiety, depression, and OCD to being a functional person that can carry out a social experiment that 200 million people saw and mock an entire movement that needed to be mocked. So I would encourage anyone who's interested to look at my the story highlights in my profile, or to just look into REBT and Albert Ellis, because it was very effective and it works for any thought disorder. It doesn't matter what it is.
So, and last question before we wrap it up, while we're on the subject of this, what are your thoughts on this new, I guess, kind of fad of treating things like PTSD with ketamine and cognitive behavioral therapy, that combination? Have you looked into that at all?
I haven't. I am familiar with ketamine. I know there's a lot of efficacy with it, and a lot of people.
I'm familiar too, just not in that way.
Yeah, and a lot of people are huge fans of it. But I know there's a tendency to abuse any drug, and ketamine is, not exempt from that. I believe Matthew Perry passed from overuse of ketamine. And so I think that, look, cognitive behavioral therapy says it's okay to use prescription drugs to assist and aid in the cognitive behavioral therapy or talk therapy that you're using to get better. But it should not be a crutch or the only thing that you're using. If you're not learning how to reorganize your thoughts to unupset yourself, then popping a Xanax or taking ketamine isn't going to do anything. But if you use those things in conjunction with cognitive behavioral therapy or talk therapy, I think it can be more effective. And so I think a combination of the two is good. We just, like with anything, you have to watch out for addiction. I actually can talk for 15 minutes longer. So if there's anything else you want to talk about, feel free.
So Leah brought up a good point in the chat. She said, I used to get severe migraine episodes from anxiety, but once I changed my diet and eliminated all my triggers, those migraines stopped. I think one of the things that people overlook a lot of the time is that with anything, drinking more water and eating properly can have a massive effect on your mental health. And combine that in with, exercise, things like that. I think it makes cognitive behavioral therapy that much easier because you already feel better at a baseline.
Yeah, no one thing is a panacea. There's not one thing you can do. I had a therapist that used to say, go out, go for walks and just smell the flowers. Look, no one thing's going to change everything. It's going to take a lot of moving parts, but taken together, like they say about working out, it's 100% diet, 100% gym, meaning they're both important. And it's the same thing with our mental health. It's, 100% restructuring your thoughts, 100% exercise, 100% diet, 100% family. Friends are important. Networking's important. Having a meaning and a purpose is very important. And so there's a lot of things that you have to do and be on top of. For me, exercise has always been kind of central to my mental health recovery whenever I'm struggling. And it's very hard because you're desire is to just lay on the couch or lay in bed. And so it's very hard to just say, I'm going to get out and go to the gym and get a workout in. But, I always go, the alternative is much worse. The alternative is to just lay here and get worse. And I can't do that. And usually that gives me the motivation to get up and go. So,
yeah, without a doubt. So I got to ask, because this is a burning question. It's bugging the hell out of me. So, number one, you're a good looking dude. Number two, you seem incredibly intelligent. How the hell did you wind up doing the whole stint on The Bachelorette? How did the reality TV become a thing?
So I actually had a girlfriend at the time. I was a dancer. I was a male stripper in Chicago, and I had a girlfriend I'd been dating for 2.5 years at that point. And the opportunity just came up. My sister-in-law had submitted an application for me, I think, to the show. And so they hit me up. And so I told my girlfriend, hey, look, if I could get on the show, then my male dancing group could use the ABC behind our name, and it would help us with our upcoming tour. And she's like, yeah, that's fine, go ahead, like, I understand you're just doing it to market yourself. And so I went on the show with that express purpose. And they actually, I didn't want to strip out of the limo. The producers were very insistent that I strip out of the limo, and they came up to my hotel room the night before, or the night of, I think it was, 3 times to argue with me and say, Josh, you need to strip out of the limo. And I was like, yeah, but I have a law degree. I want to lead with my intelligence and, lead with my intellect. Right. And they're like, just trust us. It's going to be so great for the ratings. And so I ended up stripping out of the limo. And I got eliminated early on, and most people thought, oh, that's, the end of Josh Seiter, but they were sorely mistaken. So
yeah, obviously in between The Bachelorette and, The Troll, what did you do in between? How'd you fill your time?
Yeah, so I spent about 7 years advocating for mental health on Instagram. And so that's how I got my following. I only had a couple thousand followers on Instagram when I got off of The Bachelorette. And so I spent from 2015 to about 2022, 2023, just building up a following. And most of it was through talking about mental health. Now, I would do it with my shirt off. I would post a picture, usually shirtless, and
gets
then
the eyes.
Have a mental health caption. But I did that. And then I also, danced for 4 years after I was on The Bachelorette. And then I, did a few other things. And then I started to get a little more political, as did most people, I think, with the COVID lockdowns. And realized how quickly and how thirsty our government was for power and the depths they would stoop to get it. And that kind of threw me back into my college days and my law school days, where I became a little more political minded. And I said, you know what, I want to do something about this. And then when the trans movement really got going, a couple years ago, that's when I first got the idea, I want to take this on. I really want to take this on. And so I started planning little stories in the media. I came out as bisexual. I came out as pansexual. I fake dated my workout buddy and said that I was in a relationship with my a male dancer. And then I fake dated a drag queen for a day to plan a story to say that I was dating a drag queen, because I knew that I was going to troll this community. And I was like, it's not going to be believable. It's not going to be credible. And no one's going to buy it if I don't take these steps to kind of ingratiate myself into the community and make it believable that this bisexual, pansexual guy that's dated all these different people, okay, well, it's believable he wants to be a woman now. And so I did that and kind of laid the groundwork for this thing. And Tristan Tate actually was one of the first people to interview me. And he said, me and Andrew never could have pulled this off. He's like, you were perfectly positioned because of all the stunts you had done before about being bi and pan and dating a man and a drag queen. He's like, it just pulled it all off. So
it was crazy elaborate, dude.
Yeah, it was pretty elaborate.
That's wild. And so the dancing thing, Magic Mike, how the hell did you get involved? Was that just it's going to help me pay my way through law school, or was it?
Yeah, I was dead broke I don't come from a wealthy family. I was,
Right.
just from a blue collar family when I went to law school. And so I was broke pretty quickly. And it seemed like all the other kids came from these super rich families or their dad was the senator or something. So they were good. They had plenty of money. Well, I couldn't even pay my rent. And so I was interning full time at the courthouse here in Cook County in Chicago and going to law school full time. So
Right.
the only days I had available to work were Saturday and Sunday. And so I was talking to the lady that cut my hair, and she's like, "You need to be a stripper." And at the time, I was 24 years old and, baby faced and very good looking. And she's like, "Trust me, you can make a ton of money. You only have to dance one day a week." And I was like, "I don't know anything about this, but if you put in an application, I'll do it." And she did. And they reached out to me the next week. I got a call and it said, "Come to our show tonight." And so I jumped in a cab. I barely had enough money for the cab. It was like $30.
Wow.
I didn't even think I'd have it. And by the next week, they were short a guy. And so they said, "You're coming to the show to watch again, but you're going to be in it." And then within 2 months, I was headlining the show as John Travolta in Grease Lightning, his character. And I was doing the Grease Lightning act. And then the rest was history. I did it for 6 years. And yeah.
Wow. Dude, that's kind of like the craziest timeline ever, though. From stripper to reality contestant, now
Yeah.
to everything that you're into now. That's a hell of a trajectory, but it's positioned you really uniquely. I don't know if you've looked at it like this, but you mentioned back on The Bachelorette that you have a law degree, you wanted to lead with your intelligence, right? Well, now you're in that position where you have a following, you have people that listen. Now's the time to lead with the intelligence, baby. Get into it. So
Yeah, it's kind of come full circle, and I'm very grateful for that. I double majored in poli sci and sociology in undergrad, went out and got my Juris Doctor degree, and then kind of left it by the wayside because I started stripping and was on television, and so for the next 8 years I didn't really use it, and I wasn't really politically oriented, or I was just more using my body, and so it's kind of nice to just be able to be me and to talk intelligently about topics that I'm passionate about.
yeah.
And that's been nice. I've kind of come full circle now. So that's kind of nice.
Well, and you're at that point now where I think everybody would have taken the road that you did. If you can use your body and your looks to make a living and and live comfortably, I think a lot of people would do that.
Yeah, and I don't regret it at all. It was a great experience, but I'll tell you what, I was very jaded by year 5 or 6, and I was like, is this all there is just using my body to dance and to make posts with my shirt off? Like, it's not very fulfilling after a while.
Right.
And so I'm grateful for that experience. It was cool that I got to experience what it's like to be a male exotic dancer and to be on TV and to post with my shirt off. But I'm very grateful that I am now being seen by hundreds of millions of people for something else and for calling out a movement and for trolling them. And so I'd rather be known for doing something substantial that makes an impact for us and for future generations
Yes.
than just, snapping a pic with my shirt off or stripping on stage. That's not going to have much of a lasting effect. So.
Right, exactly. Well, so obviously you said you're, focusing really on the mental health advocacy. Um, uh, any plans, any aspirations, politically or in law, anything like that going forward?
Well, a friend ran by me recently the idea of, he goes, "You should run for mayor of our hometown." I grew up in Champaign-Urbana, which is a smaller town. And, it's kind of become a poop hole in the last few years, very liberal policies, very liberal governance there with the mayors that we've had. And so I wouldn't be opposed to the idea. I wouldn't be opposed to running for public office. But I understand it's a machine. I understand that there's a lot of politics in politics, and it's
Yep.
all about who you know. And so even though I have a fairly large reach online, I'm not sure how that would translate if I were to run a political campaign, but I'm definitely open to it. And I feel like the sky's kind of the limit for me right now. And maybe given the connections I'm making and the film that's coming up that I'm doing with this company. Maybe, you know, something substantial will come of that. So I'm totally open. I kind of feel like it's hard to plan out life beyond the next day. So I try
Right.
not to think too far ahead. I try to live in the moment and kind of embrace that ethic of amor fati, which is my destiny is my destiny. Whatever's supposed to happen is going to happen.
Right.
And I should put my best foot forward, but I shouldn't be anxious over the future. I should just trust that my destiny is going to unfold how it should. And so if it's my destiny to be in politics, I'll be in politics, I guess.
Yep. There you go. Well, before we go, why don't you tell everybody where they can follow you, where they can find you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at Josh_Seiter and on Instagram, where all of the troll videos are, as well as some more recent videos at Josh Seiter Official.
Right on. Well, dude, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I mean, it's greatly appreciated. I know you've got a crazy schedule right now, so.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. I had a great time.
Absolutely. Hey, take care of yourself. We'll have to do this again soon.
Absolutely. I'll come back anytime you want, man.
Sounds good. Take care.
All right, you too.